about the scientific, the gases that we need to reduce and all that, which are of course very much related, but we don't really put people into the center. And if you put people into the center, then that really necessitates that you bring in human rights, the need to respect people's human rights, including indigenous people's human rights. No, so that was a letter that was sent all over. That will still be sent again. Maybe there will be another letter sent to Paris. But those are the efforts of some of the bodies under the Human Rights Council to really push it more strongly for human rights to become part of the decisions, because those human rights has really been very, very weak, in all the documents of climate change, and we strongly believe that it is this is the moment, for us to really put human rights strongly into the center of the decisions, so that we will be able to address the ones who are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, but we will also be able to address the potential human rights violations that can happen because of decisions being taken by the parties in the climate change convention. No? So those are just some of the efforts that are happening, and I will end with mentioning some of the ideas that emerge in relation to what needs to be done to be able to do this, to be able to achieve this goal of putting human rights into the climate change decisions. No, some of these are just a few of my ideas that I have. I have discussed with other colleagues. But one is, for instance, this Geneva Pledge on human rights for climate action. We really need to target more countries to sign on to it, because these are like the groups of countries who are already sort of considered as the friends of human rights, within the climate change negotiations. So one issue which came up is some countries are quite hesitant to actually put human rights strongly into the decisions because of the liabilities and accountabilities that they might face as a particular country. And it was mentioned, for instance, that there is now a case in the Netherlands filed by some civil society organizations against the Dutch government because of a liability that they have, because they have some actions that they have taken, like not reducing maybe fossil fuel production, can cause the violations of human rights of the Dutch people, of the Dutch citizens. So they are saying that, can you imagine what will happen if we will have human rights there? Then that will suddenly, maybe allow for a snowballing of a lot of litigation cases against states because they haven't respected the rights of peoples. So that was one issue that came up. The other issue is like, for instance, in countries, for instance, there are some countries in Latin America, I won't mention the names of these countries, but they said that they have to make sure that if ever they make a decision that's related to indigenous peoples, they have to make sure that the indigenous peoples in that country will agree to that, and that is stated in their legislature. So when we were talking about this, I said, then we should, why should indigenous peoples not agree to have a reference to human rights in the climate change decisions? I cannot understand. I cannot imagine that there will be indigenous peoples who will say, no, you cannot agree to a decision that will respect human rights. So that's one point of view anyhow that came out, and that can be used as a reason to say that we cannot just push strongly for human rights because that's the situation that we have nationally. So for indigenous peoples, I think you really need to push strongly your governments to support them, especially the 18 governments, whom I mentioned here, the ones who signed onto the pledge. Push them to say that we will give you all our blessings, to strongly put a language that strongly talks about the need to respect human rights and all climate change decisions and actions. So that's the second point that I think you have to think about, because they were saying that we can only push more strongly if there's pressure from non-state actors like civil society, indigenous peoples, women. So that means that they are also trying to put a burden on all of you to be more active in terms of pushing more strongly for the inclusion of human rights into the text, no? So that's so that they will not have a reason to say that, you know, that our indigenous peoples haven't agreed for us to negotiate this kind of issue within the climate change arena.